Doamnelor și domnilor, vă invit cu multă plăcere să-l cunoașteți pe Michael Conforti, care este un psiholog ultra cunoscut pe plan internațional, fondatorul Assisi Institute, un centru dedicat studiului psihologiei jungiene și al mitologiei. A vizitat România de curând și a fost de acord să răspundă unei serii de întrebări legate de fascinantul său domeniu de activitate și studiu care se concentrează pe integrarea principiilor psihologiei jungiene cu spiritualitatea și tradițiile mistice, explorând cum aceste aspecte pot ajuta la dezvoltarea personală și la înțelegerea profundă a sinelui. Remarcabile sunt lucrările sale despre vise, simboluri și arhetipuri, el promovând ideea că aceste elemente sunt esențiale pentru dezvoltarea personalității unice a fiecăreia dintre persoane. Sunt convins că veți găsi multe informații de mare preț în acest interviu.
Buonasera, bine ați venit și iti mulțumesc Asociația Română de Psihologie Analitică și profesora Mihaela Minulescu și Mihai Prisecaru, without whose help, collaboration, and hand-holding, today's interview would not be possible, nor would it be possible for Dr. Conforti to present in Bucharest at a conference, which you will hear about later. I have the great pleasure of serving as Director of International Studies for the Assisi Institute, the International Center for the Study of Archetypal Patterns, founded and director by Dr. Michael Conforti, who I will continue to address as Michael from now on. Michael is a Jungian analyst. He's an author. He's an international speaker, having spoken and given lectures all around the world, including Israel, Romania now, Poland, Indonesia, Australia, South Africa, Denmark, Canada, and of course in your beloved Italian Michael in Italy. Michael is a pioneer, having studied with many pioneers in their fields of the new sciences, chaos theory, quantum physics, arts, music, ethology. I don't know what you haven't studied, Michael, but what I do know is that your gift, along with having been mentored by two of the people you love the most, Dr. Joram Kaufman and Dr. Robert Langs, who taught you so much about how to listen to, discern, interpret the objective meaning of what the unconscious is constantly expressing. What you have done over the many years that I have known you is synthesize, take from all these disparate ologies, whatever it is that you study, and made of it a unique container, maybe is the word, I'm not exactly sure, but a unique manner, discipline, and art of how to not only do it yourself, but how to teach others around the world how we can sit with people in our clinical practice, how we can look at what happens in interactions with neighbors, friends, politics, everything through the lens of understanding what the unconscious patterns are revealing about the experience of humanity. How did you get here, Michael? It's an amazing story, so I'd like to start by asking you the very quintessential question. How'd you do it?
Well, thank you. Thank you, all of you, for the invitation, and especially Silvia for orchestrating this on our end. And you know how to touch a nerve, don't you? Mm-hmm. Mentioning Joram and Dr. Langs. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were the two greatest influences in my life, aside from my own family and my own ethnicity. Your question, how I got here? You know, I grew up in a very old world family. You know, a lot of people don't know what New York, Brooklyn's like, the Italian-American quartieri italiani. Maggiori parte siciliani, napoletani. And where I lived, so where I grew up in Brooklyn, the greater part of people were Neapolitan and Sicilian. It's interesting, where I moved only about 7 years ago, without knowing it, I'm right on the border of two states here in America. And I'm 2 minutes away from a town what they call Piccolo Italia. They're all 90% Calabrese. So it's back in the culture. I can spend my day speaking Italian to people. So that was one big influence. And I can tell you one thing, as a kid, it was strange. One set of grandparents never spoke English. My grandmother was from Palermo. My grandfather was from Reggio Calabria. My other grandparents were what they call Amalfitana from the Amalfi Coast.
Right.
They spoke Italian, but they spoke English at home. They knew English. And I remember my Neapolitan grandparents would say, "Ma che bello bambino, che bel bambino." And my Sicilian, "Che bello, picciolino, che bello." And I asked my father, I said, "Dad," and I was a kid, and I said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, Michael, that's an very old language that our family speaks." And somehow in hearing that, I was brought into a different world. I mean, not only the world of Italian, it's a world of la lingua antica. It's a very old language and a very old tradition. And while my father was born here, his first language was Sicilian, and that's what he grew up with that. And I grew up hearing a lot of it. I spent for the first 2 years of my life, I don't know if you know that part of it. My mother had to go back to work.
Right.
And they took me to the house where my aunts lived, my grandparents, so everybody within literally a minute and a half of each other, if not the same building. And they're up and down. My grandparents upstairs. My aunt was downstairs where I stayed every day for 2 years. I'd go there 6 a.m, come back at 6 p.m. My parents would pick me up. And I'm sure I was seeped in the culture, in the language.
Yeah.
And I never forgot it, from the food to the tradition to family. And, you can say, well, that's wonderful. We all have it. And we all, not all of us, but some of us are fortunate to have that. For me, what it spoke to was there's a different world.
Yeah.
Who knows why? No one could ever explain these guys. It's the ineffable, as Rabbi Heschel says. There's something ineffable about why I felt it was a different world. I mean, obviously, a different language. That's we got that. A different cuisine.
Yeah.
You make braciole. Braciole, the Sicilian way. You put not only pine nuts and not only a whole hard-boiled egg, but racine dentro.
Oh.
Sultana racini, the raisins inside it. So, I mean, everything was different. But again, for me, somehow it spoke to there's another world over there that has its own almost like secret language.
That's right. That's right. It's the antique soul of Jung. So
Exactly.
it makes sense that you would be drawn to someone who knew about that world.
Yeah. Well,
How did you
that's
end up with Jung?
well, how I got to Jung. Well, there were two things. The first experience before I really even knew Jung. In America, there's a place called it used to be Willowbrook State School. It was a state school for severely disabled children and adults. And I say adults, they were, in all intents and purposes, they were children. 40 years old, but they were like 4 years and 7-year-old. And I went there to do an internship. And right around the time, maybe 6 months before I got there, maybe a year before, a very famous reporter here named Geraldo Rivera did a major story about it. And he exposed it. And I was living 5 minutes away from the school. So we moved. They built what they call the Guinea Gangplank from Brooklyn. And all of us, like lemmings, we moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island, one of the outer boroughs. And from an island of 23,000 people with no Italian food, it became 505 in 10 years, 500,000 people and only Italian food. Anyway, so I went there to work, and everything he said had been cleaned up a little bit, but it was still despicable. I mean, despicable conditions. And these kids would just sit and rock all day, and I remember one kid, Ralph. I mean, I still remember like yesterday the stories. But this is really my first how I got into, I think, sort of warming me up for the Jungian symbolic world.
Yeah.
And one kid, Ralph, would play by the water fountain all day, and he would put his finger in it, and he would somehow make what are the spiders? Like a spider web. How he did it, only God knows how he did it. He made like spider webs with the water. He was staying for hours. And then the other one, the most important part for me was the little boy, I wrote about this, called The Boy Who Would Be King.
Yeah.
And this little kid would sit and rock all day long, rock and rock and rock. And unlike the other kids, he looked like I got in trouble for the language one day. He looked like a typical little boy.
Yeah.
I mean, many of the other kids had, I forget what, with a really large head or deformed bodies or all a storto, all whatever. You would never know until you just saw his behavior. Anyway, he would do that for probably 10, 12 hours a day. And then they would open up the, what do you call it, the door to have recess during the summer. I was there during the summer months. And it was very pretty grounds. Even though it's New York, it was a country like a state. It was very beautiful.
Yeah.
So they would open the door with guidance, of course, with the nurses and the caretakers. And he would run out, they blow the whistle, lunch, pausa, a break. And he would run out into the garden, open the garden gate where the flowers are. It was a non orto, un giardino. An orto for vegetables. This is for flowers. And he would run into it, and he did the same thing every day. Now, remind you, he was like this all day long, staring, catatonic. He got in the garden, and he began picking flowers. And he made a crown of flowers.
Mm.
I swear to God, he would, not that he would smile or anything, but he wasn't, I know it's not I don't know politically correct language, so I apologize if I don't say the right word. His body wasn't deformed, his head wasn't misshapen, he wasn't twitching or having terrible tics all day long. But he was just sitting. Okay.
Mm.
He put this crown of the thing on a crown of flowers, and he would run around. He was, and he would run around and yeah. And I wondered what happened. What could have happened to this little boy that he goes from where he was to this?
Mm.
So, I mean, one can never fully answer, but what I can answer right now, okay, yeah, that was my question. What happened? What could have created this transformation of a boy that was so out of touch with everything but watching the contour of the walls to this? And, in time, I gave a big lecture about this in Milan last year. And I said he entered a field.
Yeah.
And something about the field allowed the shift. The field had properties, who knows why, who knows what they all were. But I think we do need to try to understand it. Because, my God, if you think about it, if it could take this kid from being catatonic to going out there, running around and being animated and everything, maybe we can make that happen some way. Maybe we can help facilitate that. Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, that was the beginning. And one other one, talk about, these things come to you from out of nowhere. I grew up, as I said, in the tradition, very much Italian American and an athlete. I never thought about science and all that. I never did.
Yeah.
But one day I was with this other little boy. I'm sorry, little boy. He was 45 years old.
Yeah.
He was about
Right.
3.5 feet tall. He couldn't talk. He had a big misshapen head. And one day we're looking out the window, and it was one of those magnificent sunsets.
Mm.
And I wondered, what is he seeing?
That's right.
And you know what? Again, out of absolutely nowhere, this thought came, could you imagine? Look, I'm going back. So I'll say I was 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, over 50 years ago.
Wow.
Before a lot of technology we have today. Again, I'm not really interested in technology, as you know, when you help me with my computer stuff all the time. But anyway, what I thought about was, imagine if we could find some way to record his brain patterns.
Wow.
Imagine, okay, I don't know what they look like, but imagine a pattern like this, whatever, and then have a lexicon. Be able to translate what this pattern would mean, mama, this pattern would be papa, this pattern would mean, oh my God, I'm terrified, this pattern would mean, oh my God, joy. And I thought, maybe there's some way to reach him.
Wow.
And maybe he is, well, there's nobody there, right? There's nobody there. And Jung blew the whistle on that many years ago, when everyone said they're all catatonic until he discovered the stories in a lot of the cases. So this is before I read all that with Jung.
Right.
So I thought, if one of these computer companies could get together and begin to map brainwave patterns of people, especially these kids, and if they could find a way to translate, And you know what happened? How many years later? My God, I was teaching at the university. I'm going back, what, how many years after that event? 20, 30, 40, 25 years after that. I'm at the university and they say, Mike, you know what? We know you're studying chaos theory and nonlinear dynamics. We want to give you a one-day scholarship to go wherever you want to go. Include lunch.
Anywhere?
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, I had one day.
Yeah.
But I had met a man named Paul Rapp. Paul Rapp was the associate of Robert Lange's. And these are incredible days. I mean, he would come to Lange's office when I was there, studying with Lange, and we'd sit on the floor. You know what he would do? He would map the trajectory from Earth to the moon, considering the curvature of the curvature of space. And we're sitting there, having coffee and all that kind of stuff, and he's the one doing it. So anyway, he was a very well-known physiologist, and I knew he was at the University of Pennsylvania, and he had a lab. And I wrote, okay, I got one day, I got $500. I'm going to go. I mean, you guys take the money. I don't care, whatever. And I went there into I never told you this story. And I went to the lab and he was there. His associate was there. And they said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I don't know. What are you doing? I know Paul Rapps was looking at a lot of processing of brain patterns and all that. And what they did was they showed me almost what I talked about 20 years ago. They said they are now what they were able to do. Now, today is probably easy, right? But 25, 30 years ago, they would be maybe whatever the thing on you put in the brain to map the
electrodes, right?
To measure the frequency, the brainwave patterns and all that. And they would say, okay, Sylvia, they put it on your head, right? Or Michael, count from 50 down to 1 backwards. 50, 49, da, 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 da. Okay, now go from 50 to 1 by twos. 50, 48, 46. Now do it from, and it's all the different ways. And you say, this is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. By ones, by twos, by threes, by fives. And what they did was they said, I'm going to show you something now. They showed me the patterns. The brainwave patterns corresponded to the phenomena. And they could tell you what they had many people, right? Many people say number 1, number 2. Let's say 10 different people counting from 1 backwards, counting from 50, 48 backwards, whatever. And they had the same brainwave patterns. Now, mind you, I'm not interested in this stuff. What I'm interested in is what you said in your beautiful introduction, modelli.
What are the patterns?
Patroni Spanish, patroni, no?
Oh, this? Yeah, probably similar in Romania.
In patterns. And that's what they were saying. They were saying you can catch these patterns. The patterns have a certain recognizable form, that the phenomena has a recognizable form. This is what we're doing with Jungian work. You dream of the youth that's flying and creating and all these wonderful things. And as Von Franz says, the stirring allure of the bubbles of champagne, it's marvelous and exciting. Well, probably dealing with the puer and puella, How do you know it? By the correspondence. It's all about correspondence.
Right. That's right.
And it was an incredible journey. So that was it. And then what happened, the next step, and I'll stop this. You asked me about the introduction. I went to City University first 2 years in New York. And then I went to another very, very ultra liberal college with about 40 of us there. And it was saved my life. It was incredible. And my third year, after my third or fourth year, so you can go anywhere you want for 3 months. Again, anywhere you want and study. And around this time, I had a series of dreams about Jungian stuff and whatever. And I even had a dream of one analyst I never heard of before. And anyway, so I'm going to go to Zurich to become an analyst. I'm 19 years old.
That's right.
And I sent them, I got the application. I sent $100 over. And I do it with a friend. We go over and I get there, and Frau Baumann-Jung was there, Jung's niece. Yeah, who are you? So I'm Conforti. She said, oh, you're Conforti. I said, well, yeah, you're feeling kind of proud. She said, oh man, just go home. I said, what? And she said, you're too young. Come back when you're older.
That's right.
And anyway, so I go back to New York, and some incredible experiences happened while I was there for 3 weeks in Europe. And I had experiences that made me really know the importance of learning language. I could share that in the pub over a glass of wine and some. But anyway, I went back and I went into Manhattan to buy some books one day with my dad, some analytic books. He came with me. He was a longshoreman. He knew nothing about, but he supported it, right?
Okay.
Anyway, and I said, I want to stop. There's a Young Institute here, the Young Institute of New York. So I'm now about 20 years old, right? I get back from Zurich, 1920. I go in and I end up meeting a woman, the librarian, Doris Albrecht. I never forget her.
Wow.
And we talk. I told her the story. She said, "Who are you?" I said, "Well," I told her the story. She said, "You'll be back here in 6 years." I said, "What?" She said, I'll be waiting for you." I said, "Okay." I figured just some old young woman who has fantasies. And I get there 6 years later. I applied. I got into New York. I was 26. And she said, "I've been waiting."
Wow.
I said, "Are you really kidding, right?" She said, "I'm not kidding you, Michael. I knew you were going to be here." So the whole thing has been a type of strange mythic journey with the number of these meeting the wise
Yes.
people and
That's
strange
yes.
things. That's how it began. Thanks for asking. That's the story.
Good. No, because that's exactly what I was thinking about when you're talking all these people. You were born into this field to become exactly who you are. All along, chance encounters, being not
Yeah.
rejected, but accurately said, basically, Bichulino, you're too young yet.
Yeah.
Meeting people and having experienced the wise old woman, right? And then the wise men, the two wise men that took you under their wing. Really. So I'm so delighted to hear some of the stories I haven't. But you know what? I'm really hoping that you will share one of my favorite stories about what led you to really found the Assisi Institute itself. And I know you know that story, right? Because it's so,
Ho trovato amore in Assisi, yeah.
that's right, because it's so much in line and coherent with Jung's own experience. So please share that.
Well, okay, so I did begin in New York. I was really young, and we had the opening night when we meet the faculty. It's like a wine and cheese, and you meet the faculty and handing out diplomas that night to the graduates. And we were a bumper crop, like 13 of us coming in, and we were all commuters pretty much, which was unique. I was commuting from Vermont, 8 hours each way, train, piggyback, you name it. Anyway, the handing diplomas. Dr. So-and-so, congratulations, 8 years. Dr. So-and-so, Mr. Mrs., this is 12 years. Blah, 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 14. I said to my friend, we're never getting the hell out of here. This is the opening meeting. It's supposed to be a 6 to 8 year program, 8 year, 12 year. Don Calcia was there. Many of you may know Don Calcia's work on trauma. I think they said maybe 14 years and whatever. And so that was the experience. But then I had the chance of meeting the man that really shifted my life, which is Joram Kaufman. So this is a preamble to get to Assisi. So I meet him and he said, "Michael, nice to meet you." Very formal. He's from Tel Aviv. He was a theoretical physicist before he became a Jungian. And he said, "Yes, I've heard about you. Nice to meet you." But very formal with a British accent.
Yeah.
So I say, well, whatever. I was still the Brooklyn guy, right? Even though I was out of New York, living out of New York. So anyway, the next year I was assigned to his class. I doubt it. I doubt I was assigned to his class.
He pulled the strings, yes?
Esistente. He said, "Stato pre-esistente." No. I think it was all pre-existent. I think he figured that he worked this one out. And anyway, I saw what he did with dreams, and they said, "There's nobody doing this kind of work," which I could tell you now, 40 years later, there's nobody doing this kind of work. And he took me under his wing. And I learned to trust him with everything I had. And anyway, with that experience, I began working with Dr. Robert Lang, who's a very, very well-known iconoclastic Freudian analyst.
Yeah.
So I have a dual training, classical Jungian, a certified Jungian analyst, and a private Freudian. And I count my blessings every day for that. Anyway, I was teaching at the university, courses in psychopathology, abnormal psych, which always are my favorite courses. And I was wanting to make my pilgrimage to Italy.
Mm.
Pellegrinaggio, per andare alla mia famiglia in Palermo. I want to go to my family in Palermo. And I made the trip. And they also talked to the faculty. They said, look, you know what? I think there may be something brewing about more work with this. What do you mean? I said, I don't know. There's something. Too vague. So anyway, I go there. I made my pilgrimage, not speaking a word of Italian, going to Sicily, which is incredible. And it changed my life. And then part of that trip was going to Assisi, which was St. Francis of Assisi had always been my patron saint. And I even went to St. Francis Prep High School in Brooklyn.
Wow, that's right.
You know, so it was preesistente, prefigurata. Okay. So anyway, I go there and oh my God, this was 1987. I can't figure out, I'm terrible at math. Somebody could do the math. 1987, because the conference began 2 years later. 1987 to today is what?
38 years ago.
38 years ago. Okay, thanks. Almost 40 years ago. So I'm there and I'm just taking in the ambience, and it's in a region in Italy called Umbria. Very beautiful. It's right on the border of Tuscany. Similar terrain, similar beautiful mountain rolling hills. And anyway, one day I'm just sitting on this wall, stone. It had to be hundreds of years old. Maybe some of the buildings are 100 years old there.
That's right.
I'm sure it's very similar in Romania, probably similar architecture and stone walls and all that. And I'm sitting on this wall, and this thought came out of me again, like when I was with the little boy. A thought out of nowhere, and it said, "You got to come back here and do a conference." And the conference is on the confluence of matter and spirit. La confluenza di spirito e lo spirito e materia e la materia. Ma che dici? Ma che dici? Ma nessuno è stato là. Nessuno è stato vicino a me. There was nobody near me, but the voices, as they were right there. And I said, I don't even know what these words mean. Confluence. Confluence of matter and spirit. And I'm looking around. And I guess I better find out. The psyche's telling me these things. I better find out what it is. And I go find out. And it really is confluence is where two streams come together.
Right.
And matter and spirit, well, the dreams I had before I knew who it was an analyst who recently passed away named Arno Mindell.
Oh, yes.
Arno Mindell, and years later, I didn't know who he was. And I went to Zurich based on some of these dreams, right? And it turns out I read some of his work. When he went to Zurich to study, he was interviewed by Jung, his initial interview to get into the Institute. And who are you? What's your story? He said, well, I'm a theoretical physicist. And he had a dream of something. I don't remember the dream right now. And it was either in the dream or in the interview. Jung said to him, your job is to bring together the streams of physics and Jung. This is when I was I was reading this stuff when I was 19, 20 years old. I'm reading these things. I don't know who, and I'm in a dream. Mendel, who's Mendel? I don't know Mendel. So anyway, when I see the thing, the confluence of matter and spirit, that's been really my work for the past 40 years. Really studying the confluence of. I mean, I'm not interested in science for science sake. Einstein even said, he said, I really could care less about science as a thing. I care about science as what it reveals about the universe.
Right. That's right.
Richard Feynman, who got the Nobel Prize, he said, it's not math or whatever I care about, it's what it reveals. I mean, these are underlying codes of life. And that's really what it was for me, is the underlying codes. And then, we did the first conference 2 years later. I went back to university, and I said, I'm not even going to tell you the dream. I'm going to tell you the story. But I said, like, I do well. Students like my class. Always really a lot of students in it.
Yep.
And I told them I want to do a conference. I said, okay. And they floated it financially. So this began as part of the university, the first 2 years. And I put it together. I did some kind of write-up, confluence, matter, and spirit. And people began calling me. We did a back then you do brochures and mailings. We did.
I remember. I got one. That's how I ended
Did you
up.
save it?
It's framed on the wall.
I have some here yet.
Great.
And people say, can you, I read about it, sounds great. I see you can have a theoretical physicist, some Jungians. Aryeh was there. My best friend of all time, Aryeh Maidenbaum, he was there. Mitchell Rabin, who you've met, so he's got a TV show in New York, 45 years. Another woman that studied at the Goethe Institute in Germany. And anyway, so we did it. People calling me up first about, what is it? I said, well, it's about the confluence of matter and spirit. Oh, yeah, we read that. Well, can you say any more? I said, well, it's about matter and spirit and matter. And matter and spirit. They said, can you say any more? I said, no, I'm sorry.
I have to find out what it means.
I got to
And
find
that's
out
what you did.
I mean, I really couldn't describe anymore. I said, well, you know what? I kind of trust it. And I'm thinking, why? But we had, for the maiden voyage, we had 17 people. And then the next couple of years, we had the world leaders, Irvin Laszlo there. And I'm thinking, Irvin Laszlo, one of the most famous in the world, probably gets, even back then, get a fortune for a lecture, And he came and he stayed for 3 and 4 and 5 days. Are you kidding me? But he never did. I don't do that when I go to lectures. I go and I leave pretty much because we all have a life. And he said to me, Michael, you're onto something here. He said, there's something you're onto, which is wonderful. And I want to be, and he said, we're jointly discovering. And he's the author of probably 200 to 300 books already, now he's old. But there was a spirit, and we all knew we were on, as Lang's used the term, he said, I'm holding on to the tail of the tiger here. I'm just holding on for dear life.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. We didn't know what it was about, but we knew it was about archetypes and matter and spirit. And because what it was I realized that a lot of people that care about psyche really couldn't be in the world too well. Most of the people I met and people I knew from my family, they were all what I call masters of the material universe. They could build a car out of spit and glue.
Right.
So, but it seemed like never the confluence happened. It didn't happen for many. And I said, but it is there. It's intrinsic.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been studying ever since. So that's a long. You probably didn't want that much of an answer, but you got it anyway.
Well, you and I have been working together many years, and I've heard many, many stories, and I relish the new ones and love the old stories because they really ground us. But today, as I hear you talking, there's something new that I understood. And that is, you say, out of nowhere,
Nowhere.
out of the blue. But that's not accurate, Michael. That because of what you're saying, and this is what I understood, and I want to just shift the conversation just a little bit, is what you have been following, your trajectory of your life through the dreams, through these experiences, is to live out your fate. Your destiny, excuse me, not your fate, your destiny, right? And that there is a way when you follow the promptings of psyche. Go here at 19, young man, where you're not really rejected, but that takes you here. The librarian, meeting Robert Langs, meeting Yoram Kaufman, meeting this person, that person.
Well, like breadcrumbs, huh?
All like breadcrumbs. But isn't that exactly what you teach us and in all the programs is to help the people who come to us as clinicians, to help them discern the difference between fate, what we're brought into by trauma, family, history, culture, and so on, and what is their destiny. So I'm just very moved because in my former training, one of the McLean, Dr. Angus McLean, talked about that the method is the message. The way that you have followed the promptings of Psyche when she said, you come here, you go there, meet that person, is exactly what you're training so many people around the world to sit with their patients and say, look, this, that, help to discern, translate, emerge what is their destiny, and not, you could have been fated to be a truck driver in Brooklyn. That
I
was
thought it was a dream for me. But
that's
I did drive an ice cream truck for 3 years.
didn't you buy a fleet of them?
I had 3 of them.
So that is, something really new to add to this fabric. You have lived the experience, right, of what it means to work through those fields and patterns that, as you teach, that keep people orbiting around a trauma, right? The repetition. So as possible, I'd like to bridge to how you got to using all of this or working all of this in the clinical setting of how you hear what psyche is saying.
No, it's very beautiful the way you're threading it together, because I mean, as you're saying it, what I'm really catching also from my almost first time right now is, well, I put together this course, The Voice of Psyche, and it's really about how archetypal dynamics are manifested in the material relationship between patient and therapist.
Yeah.
La confluente,
Yeah.
lo spirito e la materia. I can tell you how it happened. I was in the seminar with Dr. Kaufman, so I'm going back probably my second or third year of training, maybe 28, 29, whatever. And I had begun a little bit to struggle in the Jungian stuff because the clinical, aside from Jörn's work, the clinical wasn't as strong as I had hoped. The mythology, the dreams. I mean, he with the dream was off the charts, brilliant. But anyway, I began seeing in the class, it was a case supervision group where we have about, maybe 6 of us students who are all Jungian puppies, pretty much first and second year, pretty much. This master analyst from Israel, brilliant, stern as hell too, very stern. And this was not a cuddly bear and coffee breaks and nothing. Okay. And I began seeing something that was just phenomenal, that say 6 of us, right? Number 1 to 6. Number 1, all of the cases person number one presented, they all revealed his or her psychic dynamic. Oh, my patient is a raging narcissist. My patient is this. Number 2, my patient, they really can't establish attachment. Well, you've been married four times already, I'm thinking, right? And you're talking to me about attachment issue. Another one about aggression. So I said, you fight with the butcher, So each of them began talking about this one issue, which was their issue.
Right.
And I figured, okay, and this went, me too, across the board, okay? And I said, either it could be the proverbial expression in English, a carpenter with a hammer and a nail, that it means no matter what you see, if you come from incest, everything is incest. You come from eating disorders, everything's eating disorder. You only see, it's a very limited, myopic in English, a very limited way of seeing things. Or there was something else at work. And I said, Dr. Kaufman, can I talk with you a little bit? He said, of course, Michael. So we met after class one day. And I explained what I was seeing. He said, you need to speak with Dr. Robert Langs. I said, who? Dr. Robert Langs. You don't know him? Oh, dear, you should know him. Well, you are going to know him, and you will know him. Okay. And I had learned to respect Kaufman anyway, and he was just a wonderful man. And so I called him up, and and I called him up, and somehow I got him later in the evening. I don't know why he answered the phone. He said, Dr. Langs. I said, yeah, Dr. Langs, this is Michael Conforti. Well, who are you? What do you want? Hello to you too. And he said, well, what is it? I said, well, I'd like to begin supervision with you. Why? I said, I'm really thrown. Why? I want to learn how to do the work that you do. Do you know what I do? Not really. So what do you want to learn? He said, I'm a Brooklyn Italian. He's a New York Jew. Okay. And he said, well, what is it? So I'm training at the Jung Institute. He said, oh, Jungians don't like me. You're not going to learn anything. And Jungians don't know anything anyway. And then he was off. Well, Freudians don't like me, and they don't know anything either. The Adlerians, the Gestalt, the object relation. And he said, when you think about it, no one knows anything but I do. I say, I'm still here. Can I get an appointment? Say, okay, whatever. Come on. I'll see you. Here's my address. I'll see you next Wednesday, whatever. So and he said, but bring something. Well, what do you want? Lunch? Or what do you want? He said, bring a case, bring something close to you. Jungians know what it means. Bring something, supervision. Okay, I'll bring something. Let me see what we can do. I mean, see, I don't have much hope. Nice meeting you too, Dr. Langs. So this was the opening phone call. So I go the next Wednesday to this dismal office with this hospital green on the walls and a picture of a frog and a couch and a chair. he said, you got something? I said, well, hi, I'm Michael. He said, oh, yeah, I know who you are. I know who you are. What do you got? And I said, well, I'm going to tell you a case. So he takes out his lunch. He starts eating his lunch, and then he starts balancing his checkbook. And I tell him this story. I said, aren't you going to help me? He said, I'll help you when I got something to help you with. There's nothing here yet. I said, okay. And he said, my patient had a dream the other day. In the dream, she's driving down the road in a car, and she sees God pulling trees out by the roots. And he says, well, clearly it's obvious. Okay, yeah. About what? I said, again, Jungians, Freudians, no one knows this stuff. I mean, I said, okay, I got that. What does it mean? He said she had another abortion. And it was one of many because God pulled many trees out by the roots. He said, don't you know? I said, no. He said, what are you doing? I said, I don't even know why you're in practice. And luckily, I grew up in a tough family, and I wasn't looking for accolades. I wasn't looking for a pat on the back. I was looking for a real teacher. I mean, I had it with Kaufman, and Kaufman was also very tough. Okay. So anyway, he said, go back and see what happens the next session. Will you please? And then, okay, you need me. I said, okay. So I arranged supervision. So anyway, I go back to my case where he said the patient had multiple abortions, and the patient comes in and says, oh, last week was a very powerful session. I'm thinking, I don't have a clue what happened. Powerful? But what was powerful? I did nothing. I didn't know. I didn't understand anything. She said, well, I just got back to my 5th abortion. I said, how the hell did he know that?
Right.
How did he know it from the dream? And I'm going to tell you, I love Urim. Urim is the most brilliant dream analyst I ever met. He would not have picked that one up. I don't know anybody that would have picked that one up. Now, of course, there are multiple levels, the symbolic and all that, but I don't think anybody would have caught the radici di questo sogno, the roots, great image, right?
Yep.
The roots of this dream. The roots are, it's an abortion experience rooted in the physiological, or who knows where it's rooted, but it's happening in real time by an actual abortion. And now we had the Jungian piece. There are probably multiple psychological, archetypal abortion, a career, a potential, whatever.
Right.
And I said, Dr. Langs, when he came back, I said, yeah, you're right. He said, I know I'm right. I said, how did you get it?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Grasshopper. That's from that old TV show we have in America called Kung Fu, Grasshopper. And he said, well, it's clear. The dream is a representation of a biological fact. Stripped of family issues, stripped of religious connotations, stripped of any ethnic or gender-related issue. It's a biological fact of something that's alive being torn out, which is what happened with an abortion.
Right.
Now, I gave a lecture recently, just about 2 weeks ago. Somebody said, well, can it mean other things? I said, of course, that's the therapeutic work. But I'm saying, no one would have caught that one. I didn't catch it. But that's why I said, you know what? Sign me up for the next 30 years.
That's right.
And I stayed. But it all began because, how did it begin? It was in that class.
Yeah.
And when I began theorizing what it was, which I try to do, my experience is much more phenomenological. I have an experience, and so what happened?
Right.
And I realized that something was orchestrating behavior to create a confluence. Back to that word. That word has become paramount in my life, right? Something was creating an entrained response. Trascinamento. Trascinamento, arrastere, Spanish, arrastere. Trascinamento. It's when something is pulled by a force of something. And that's what I wanted to study. And I said, wait a minute, whoa. Is there anything? See, I like to look at parallel experiences. Is there anything in the natural world that creates a design in response to a force? And I said, magnetic field. The iron filings will respond to the magnet underneath. They create a circle, a square, random, until you put the magnet and whoop, they come together. Gravitational, magnetic, and whatever. And I said, this is the workings of il campo. E forza del campo, più forte. And that's when I began discovering fields. So this is from the Urim experience in the classroom to go into Lang, and then I start putting together.
Yeah.
This has been the last 40 years of my work and studies and now teaching. So, and when he did it, so yeah, and to all of you, listening to this, how did you get from there to there? And Urim did it with dreams all the time. But I tell you, I love him, I adore him, but he would not have caught this one. In terms of the physiological, he may have picked up things of being uprooted, whatever.
But
And
not
so I realized the unimaginable power of trauma and the unimaginable power of what I've begun calling about 10 years ago, psychic representation. How psyche will tell a story. It's through specific images.
And they don't only come through dreams.
No, through behaviors, and especially, thank you, especially through repetitions.
Can you put an example, a clinical example where kind of like a tiny case study so people can understand what it actually looks like in a session where it's not represented by a dream, right?
Behavior.
But behavior and or narratives, because it's really, you're giving this beautiful container of theory, but what's it actually like when you're sitting with someone and they tell you something?
My God, there's so many pieces. I'll give two.
Good.
One, a woman called and she wanted to do treatment. I want to do couples counseling. I said, well, you're making the call. Why don't you just come for the appointment instead of coming with your husband? No, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know the story, anything. She said, okay, I can agree to that. I can understand since I'm making the call, but I really want couples counseling. I said, well, we'll see. We'll talk about it. So we make it again, maybe next Tuesday, right? So I'm waiting for the appointment 10 o'clock in the morning and nobody there. 5 after 10, 10 after 10, I get a phone call. Hi, Dr. Conforti, this is so-and-so. I can't make it. I don't feel well today. Well, you could have called a while ago, but I didn't say a word, of course. Okay, I see you next week. Bye, I see you. So next week, 10 o'clock, Tuesday, I go to the waiting room. Who was there?
Her husband.
She and the husband. And I was kind of young at the point. I was perturbed. I wasn't sure how to handle it. Well, anyway, what evolved was quite incredible. So I said, "Good, both you come in then." And he's obviously disgruntled. Okay, one of this stuff, and she begins talking, and he said, "Look, let me tell you what I think is going on here. She's mad at our living situation. That this is where you realize unconscious communicates all the time. The self communicates." He said, "Look, we have a family. I have a family business. Now we're married, so she's in the family, but it's my family business. We're a group of we work with wood, lumber, and cutting wood, and all that stuff. And we all live pretty much together. And my mom and dad come into my home without knocking on the door. They come in. We go to their house, and he says." And they both say, yeah, we both hate it. All we want is some privacy. We want to be able to lock the door and nobody else come in the room, come in. And I say, okay, here's my entree. I say, you're saying that it's all one big beehive. Everybody comes in and out whenever they want to. I mean, you wonder about sexual imagery with that too. Hold that thought. That's a Freudian lens that I've got. Everybody comes in and out whenever they want to. No one even asks permission. They just walk in, walk out, whatever, take what they want and things. And here you both are in a session. It's supposed to be her session. How about the husband? I think, why don't you leave? He said, I was hoping to God you'd say that to me. I don't want to be here. Half of the story. He said, thank you, Doc. And he walks out. He says, wife, I'll see you later. She sits there and it's me and the door is locked. And she starts looking around.
Yeah.
And she says, you think you can open the door? Well, what's happening? I just don't feel very comfortable right now. She said, when my mom died, all of us, like 4 kids, were shipped out to other people, other family members, but me. I was I stayed with my dad. He wanted me to stay with him. I was about 4 years old, 5 years old. And my dad wanted me to be his wife. Every way. Every way. You know, I don't want to be here ever. And I said, well, I mean, it's clear. I mean, with your husband out of here, the fear comes up understandably and the terror. Well, I don't think I really want to do this. I don't want to be here. Well, if you want to continue, I'd be happy to see you. But it's clear that, you know, the terror is, and in some ways, having all those people around kept the terror at bay. And you know what dawned on me just now saying, Silvia? I've just finished a year-long seminar in our class on defense mechanisms. And I said, it's often as important to see the presence and workings of a defense mechanism as it is about the trauma underneath it that is defending against. Here it was so clear that she was defending against the horror of being alone with somebody.
Right.
And she never came back. Now, look, people might say, well, you should have done this, should have done that. I don't want to even have that discussion right now. That's not the most important piece. The most important piece at this moment, we can have that discussion, is you saw how having a husband there really was a external manifestation of the defense system.
Okay.
Those of you that may not be therapists hearing this, I mean, she protected herself by being in a large group, in a crowd.
Safety in numbers, right?
Oh my God, it was just absolutely incredible. Incredible. I never forgot it. So in that thing, in terms of your question, how do I see it? There we saw that iatrogenico. Il trattamento è stato iatrogenico. The treatment became iatrogenic in one hand, but you see, by using the language that I've developed over the years, it became an outward manifestation of the defenses. She didn't want to be alone because the terror was when she was alone, when all the kids were shipped out, she was father's 5-year-old bride, sexually and otherwise. She was terrified. And again, please, I can imagine many people say, well, you could have done this. Yeah, there may be other things I could have done, but I want to talk more about the phenomenon first.
That's right.
The other one, which these are the two very powerful cases of my career. Another woman called me up and she said, well, I heard good things about you as an analyst and I'd like to begin therapy. I said, okay. So I got my orario. Okay. Potremmo fissare un appuntamento adesso? No, è importante aspetta.
Wait.
No. Prossimo mercoledì, giovedì, venerdì. No, aspetti. C'ho molte domande. She said, I'm not going to make an appointment now. So I'm ready with my appointment book. She said, no. Aspetti, wait. And she said, I got a few questions for you. I think, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, please, let's not talk about methods of treatment. It's more the experience. It's like you can make coffee many different ways, but it's still coffee. Get the point? Okay? It's still a tomato. You can do a million things with tomatoes, but it's still tomato. Okay, this is a phenomenon. She says, I got a few questions. And at that moment, I already had to make a decision in myself.
Right.
And do I respond? And if I do, what are the consequences? Because and I had begun to learn about the replicative dynamics in treatment. I had begun to learn about it. So I said, okay. She said, well, where'd you go? Where'd you do analytic training? I said, could you wait for the first session? She said, no, I told you no. I'm not going to have the first session unless you answer my question. So it's tyranny, it's also defenses and all that, but I knew if I didn't make if I didn't respond, there'd be no appointment. And for many reasons, one has got to be my own welfare, my own finances, to build my practice. Also needed to offer her something to build a bridge from wherever she was to now. And I said, okay, I trained in New York, the Young Institute in New York. At that point, there was only one, the original one, that was founded by Esther Harding back in the 50s.
Right.
And thinking, okay. Get my no.
Next
Okay. So she said, I have more questions. Tu sei sposato? È maritato? Gli sono parole un po' vecchie, no? Maritato. I said, are you married? I said, yes, I'm married. And so, okay. And if she said, okay, basta così. I say, you know what? I've answered a few questions. I don't believe my clinical opinion is going to be helpful for me to answer any more questions. If you'd like to make an appointment, my appointment book's over there, not in my hand. It's over there. If you don't want to, I'll understand, but I would wish you well. She said, okay, you answer my questions. I'll see you next, if you still get that Tuesday, I'll be there. Okay. So you could make it up if you're really creative, but this is real. So here I responded to the questions, right? You get two of them. And my stato bucanero, you know, it's a black hole. Once you start to answer, it's a it's a black hole. So she comes in and says, well, you know, thank you for answering my questions. You're very generous and you're not rigid. I'm thinking, well, let's see what this is really about. Because I knew she's going to have to work it over. So she says, I have something very strange to talk about. I've had problems with relationship with men. And you know what? I've had the same problem with 3 different men. I said, okay. Now wonder, with 3, what about 4? Because I'm one of them now too. So she said, what I do is I meet a man, say, go out for coffee. We meet at a little place and we have a nice coffee. And it's nice conversation. He's pleasant, he's bright and generous and all that. And no, I'll pay for my own. No, let me buy you. Does your cafe or dulce, you know, it's nice, right? A little dessert or coffee. So I'd love to see you again. I would too. And then see you again. Lunch, I know a really nice place for lunch. And it happened to be a place I love. My favorite lunch place. So we go. And great. And then we go a second time for lunch. He said, you know, I have a feeling that this restaurant I happen to know about, and I know the chef owner. I have a feeling you love it. Well, I never heard of it. And we go, it was exactly the kind of food I love.
Mm.
How did he know? And, you know, he said, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I know this wine that's really an exquisite wine. Let me, if you don't like it, don't worry. I'll buy you whatever you want. But I know that wine. It was my favorite wine. And he didn't know. He had no way of knowing the facts of my life. He had no way of knowing my preferences. With dessert later, o dolce e pieni di pistacchio.
Mm.
How did he know I loved a dessert, a brioche with pistachio? How did he know? With a little bit of gelato sopra quello, with a little bit of ice cream on top. He seemed to magically know what I wanted, what I loved, the kind of chocolate I love. That chocolate, you know, like the German chocolate. When Annette, our program coordinator, goes back to Germany, she'd bring me one every year. It's a chocolate filled with orange. I love it. It's hard to find. Anyway, he knew I loved that. And you got it. And I think this has got to be la forza del destino. It's the force of destiny giving me. He's my soulmate. So we're together. One thing leads to another, from the kiss to the hand holding to you know, to all of it, right? We have a full relationship, and you know, we start spending more and more time together. It's wonderful. And about 8 months into it, he's obviously in a bad mood one day. So, honey, what is it? Nothing, man. Come on. We're together. We're a couple now, right? What is it? If you can't talk to me, well, we got a problem. Is it okay? I'm having a cash flow problem. And I've got to pay a tax bill. I got like a $10,000 tax bill right now. And I'm going to go to the bank. I'm trying to find the right bank to get like a 5-day interest, 5 days, a loan for 5 days. They can pay back in 5 days. I have the big thing coming in, the big check coming in from that company over there, the company over there. I'll be fine in 5 days. But if I don't pay the thing for tomorrow, I'm going to have a huge penalty. Honey, you don't have to go to the bank. No, I do have to go to the bank. I'm the bank. I'll loan you the money. I can't ask. You didn't ask. You're not asking.
Ugh.
So I give it. She says, you sure 10? You want 15? No. In case they're a few days late with the payment, take $15,000. Okay. Okay, look, I'll do it. Thank you. I love you so much. Grande innamorata. Tu sei mia grande innamorata, no? My beloved. And he says, okay, I got to go away for a couple of days for work. And when I get back on Friday, today's Monday, Tuesday, I get back. We'll talk to the cook during the week while I'm gone. But I got seats. That dinner you love, I know another one. And then we got seats at your favorite play. You kidding me? And I know you like the orchestra seats right in front. I got it. Okay, honey, let's go to bed. And, nice romantic night, candles, music, and all great stuff, right? And he leaves in the morning, how about a breakfast, a nice breakfast, kiss me goodbye, blah, 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 great stuff, right? And he goes away and said, talk to you tonight. Say, I'll call you later. He didn't call that night. And she called about 3 times. Said, honey, everything okay? Okay. And he never called. She said, well, he must be exhausted. Maybe crashed, take a plane somewhere. So the next day she called one day, hey, honey, just checking everything okay. I missed you last night, all that, right? Anyway, long story short, he never called back. She never saw him again. Never saw or heard from him again after that. And she said, now, if that was bad enough, the same thing happened with 2 other men. I said, my dear, let me tell you something. It happened with 3 more men. I gave you what you wanted. I answered your questions. I didn't want to, but I did. Why? In the same way, these people gave you everything you wanted, and they knew what they were doing. It was a grand seduction. A grand seduction. You're telling me it was also seduction on my part to get you to be patient and all that. And you tell me it was manipulative on my part, like these men. And based on this, no more. Now, at this point, I didn't know that there was a much deeper thread. This is the early days of my study of this, the early days of my discovery. I didn't know there was what came out years later was maybe 2 years later. She said, there's a story I never told you. And I thought we did, I was naive. I didn't, naive in some ways, but I didn't know there was going to be more. I figured there was more something, but I never expected what came out. And she said, when I was young, about 4 years old, my mother had to go back to work. And she was divorced. And my mother took me to my grandparents' home. And my grandfather, I thought, loved me very much. We spent a lot of time together, a lot of time together. And we'd go out, we'd buy dolls, go to dolls and get the donuts, con pistachio, all the great stuff. And slowly but surely, you are so special to me. Number one, this is going to be our secret relationship. And you know what? You're going to be my queen. And you're so special. You know what queens need? Sometimes a queen needs to be massaged. And it began. And it began. And it began. Queens need to have their bodies. And they need to feel the king's special parts too. She said it went on for years. She couldn't tell her mother. Only when she was older, when she finally got out of it, she told her mother, well, he did the same to me. Well, why did you bring me to him? She did the same to you, and you bring me to him? Okay, so your question, how did I learn about it? Now it was a pattern that not only was she repeating it with the men, where the men became the seducers, grooming her to steal her precious things, the money. Not only was I one of the men grooming her in some ways, of course, it was never sexual between her and I, grooming her to be a patient. I get the money and then have her the patient, whatever. Maybe you get these stories. And the root of it was not only the grandfather, but the mother who sends her into the lion's pit with steak wrapped all over her. They could eat her alive. It was all repeated. It was a singular drama to be repeated.
Yeah.
And then when I go to Romania, I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to have some of the shells with me, the carrier shells, where you see these shells, they had this uncanny proclivity to do one thing, which is to repeat a pattern. Even if it means repeating the pattern, it could result in the demise of the organism. So she was repeating the pattern as I did with her. And I wrote a whole book about this then. But in Spanish, código nato, it was the original title in Italian. Codice nato. And it's a better title than one in English. English is feel, form, and fate. Pattern of mind, psyche, and codice nato. It's about innate codes. I mean, I love the title better in Italian than the original one in Spanish. So anyway, I learned about these codes. But see, code is not quite, if you look at code from the natural world, it's great because there are natural codes, the Fibonacci code, the Pythagorean code. Codes other times is we're gonna hide something. So we do a code. 135 really means bomb the country at 4 o'clock. That's hiding it. Like we're coding the language. This is not for the sake of making secret, but really to reveal. Anyway, that's what I learned, and it continues every session with people until you catch it, until you interpret. Which I did catch it early, but then only a year later when she said, "I got to tell you." But you see how she was repeating that pattern with those 3 men and then me with 4 men, the same pattern.
You know, I remember probably more than once you said, "Do you know why rabbis look so sad? Because of what they carry." And as you're talking today, yet again, I'm very struck by the fact of what you talk about and why you are right now lecturing all over the world to bring this work to light. And I understand even more deeply today than I have in the past when you say so many methodologies, approaches, therapists, analysts don't want to look at what is really being revealed because it is so incredible to sit with not only the trauma of the patient as it emerges, but the fact that we as clinicians repeat the trauma and that the redemptive piece can be when we translate who we have become, when for the first time in a patient's life, their experience is being validated. Yes, I did this to you just like. Not you imagine, not the Freudian piece. You imagine that. It's not the Oedipus. It's I was seduced.
Not transfer. It's real. It's a real reenactment. Not it by. Yeah, you're right.
It's real. And so that really, I think even more deeply, I understand the impetus, right? To go, like you're going to go to Bucharest in May, right? To bring this work, not only to clinicians, because it also helps us as
Everybody.
human beings, right? When we're dealing with our children, with our grandchildren, with our friends, neighbors, when there's so much going on in the world, we're looking for some magnetic north, some objective reality, some way, like you've said this, a North Star, right? So that we can, as clinicians, help. I don't want the language to be hyperbolic either, right? So that we can determine and see that there's something, and this is an image you've used many times, is to help an ego develop enough strength that the ego can put its hand on the rudder, and instead of being blown by the winds of incest and trauma and all the things that happen, steer a much cleaner course to live out their destiny.
Well,
And
oggettivo, non soggettivo. Oggettivo, soggettivo. It's the 2 major pieces. You're right.
The objective. And so I think that going to Bucharest live, in person, sarà una cosa magnifica. It's going to be something wonderful because what I know, the fact that we are doing a class in Romania in a couple of weeks, a 5-week class where you'll meet the students. But in our initial meetings that we have had, there is such a resonance in the culture and the language between the Romanian and the Italian and the antique soul. And so I'd like to end the interview now with a great word of mulțumesc, thank you. Thank you to the producers of the video who are going to be presenting this. Thank you. Mulțumesc to Mihai, without whom really this would not have been. And that speaks to, well, I think I have more. And that speaks to exactly, Michael, what you followed. Somebody gets a call. I got a brochure. I don't even remember how many years ago. You got this thing that the Assisi Institute itself, the International Center for the Study of Archetypal Patterns, is an attractor site, is a magnet for those who have the courage, the fortitude, the humility to look at really what psyche is emerging in a person's life and not to look away.
Yeah. Beautifully put. Beautifully put.
So,
And then many times we can't even follow the threads for a while. You know, there's just one foot in front of like Langs, you know, holding onto the tail of the tiger for a while. You don't know where it's going to take you.
that's right.
And you pay a price. I mean, you pay, look, doing the work around psyche, soul, unconscious dynamics, trauma, let's say, I'll admit it, it's a lonely life. It's difficult. Because you're always seeing the unconscious part of it. And the unconscious, many times it's some of the darker aspects. Yeah, beautiful things happen in life too. But many of the greatest works of art were also created out of rough things.
Picasso's Guernica. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many.
Yeah.
Thank you also, Michael. Grazie mille.
Prego, è stata una grande opportunità per me.
Thank you. Thank you. And see you in Bucharest.